This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I don't know if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, but wherever you are, please give us a like or a follow or a thumbs up. Is that all the things that they can do?
Aggressively smash the heart button.
Yeah. And subscribe, because
or the stars.
Then you'll get a notification every time the stars, yes.
It's the stars, not the heart.
Well, it could be a heart.
And smashing the stars, you're exhibiting your heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the thumbs up on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's giving your heart to us.
Yes.
Well, we appreciate the likes and the subscribes and the follows, because not only does it help you for getting the notification every time we release an episode, but it helps continue to share and boost our algorithm essentially, so that other people can get to know us and get to know this awesome work. So we're going to dive right into our question.
Cool.
Awesome. Our listener Camilla asks, what exercises should I do for a herniated disc?
Camilla, thank you for that question. Loaded question or loaded answer.
I'm sure there's a lot.
I should say.
Yeah.
Because I will say this is something that I get very commonly, and other healthcare providers will get this commonly. Hey, I have this diagnosis. What do I do for this thing? Mm-hmm. And I do wish that it was as simple as saying, oh, you have a herniated disc. Do this thing. Oh, you have a torn rotator cuff. Do this thing.
Well, before you continue, I feel like social media paints that that's how it works, right? It paints the do these 3 movements or do these 3 things and you're going to be completely cured. And the reality is there is simple solutions, but there's a lot of complexity in the midst of them.
Exactly. 3 easy exercises to reduce your back pain from a herniated disc. Oh, okay. I'll do those 3.
Sounds great.
But let's get into the nuance of why I struggle, and why, if you're listening as a provider, why you should struggle to go, oh, herniated disc, go do prone press-ups. Herniated disc, use the McKinsey extension protocol. There's much more to it. There's much more to it. So the first question I have to ask is, well, where is the herniated disc? Is it the lumbar spine? Is it the cervical spine? For our discussion, I'm going to just assume it's the lumbar spine, just to kind of keep it more pinpointed where we can.
Okay.
So lumbar spine, the lower back, herniated disc. When did you get symptoms? Was there a mechanism of injury? When was imaging done? Because the likelihood is that if you know that you have a herniated disc, it's because an image was done. But here's the catch. People that have asymptomatic herniated disc, or they have no symptoms whatsoever, can still show herniated disc on imaging. Mm-hmm. And actually the percentages as you get older is higher, that there's a higher percentage of herniated disc on imaging with a decreased percentage of people experiencing symptoms from the herniated disc.
Wow.
Because it used to be, back hurts, let's go get an image. Oh, the image shows the herniated disc. Therefore, the back pain that you have is caused from this herniated disc. Where researchers said, hey, you know what? What if we looked at the imaging of spines in people that don't have symptoms? And shockingly, they found that herniated discs are not that abnormal. Mm-hmm. They have also found that most herniated discs will heal on their own. Natural regression. People talk about natural healing, and they think of supplements or naturopathy and things like that. That is alternative healing. Mm-hmm. You are born with natural healing, and herniated discs show that. Mm-hmm. The rate of spontaneous regression is very high. It's called the regression to the mean, and a lot of times herniated discs will completely heal on their own. Sorry, diving into that too soon, but pulling back out. What symptoms do you have for herniated disc? Because most of the time, the symptoms of a herniated disc is that you're having back pain with numbness and tingling going down the leg. Most of the time, it's on one side, not on both sides. Most of the time, there's a mechanism of injury. I went to go lift something and then felt this. Other times, people will say, well, I don't really know what brought it on, but still we need to look and see what are the symptoms that you have that would classify this to be more likely that it's coming from the spine and specifically from a potential herniated disc. If we're getting numbness and tingling going down both sides, it may be that you're living too much in extension. The facet joints are closing down and impinging on both nerve roots that are leaving the spinal cord, more of like a stenosis type of presentation. So the image doesn't give us much information. The symptoms that you're experiencing give us a lot of information. The mechanism of injury gives us a lot of information. Because sometimes the exercises do for a herniated disc is to just let you know that you're going to be okay. And that alone takes away some of the guarding if they don't have the numbness and tingling going down the leg.
Well, maybe that should be the first thing. It's like, I'm okay, I'm safe.
I'm
like,
safe.
3 exercises for herniated discs. Number 1, tell yourself that you're okay and that you're safe repeatedly.
Right.
And believe it.
Right. And that you will be okay and that your body has the ability to heal on its own. And I understand that sometimes it doesn't do that, but it's not because the body is damaged or broken. It's because there's too many other things going on without coping mechanisms that's not allowing that natural process to occur. So the symptoms that you're presenting with, and then we would go into see what is your directional preference, meaning which ways do you move that increase symptoms? And by increasing symptoms, meaning what movements do you do that bring symptoms further down the leg? That is peripheralizing symptoms. It's radiating them further, which means we don't want to do that for a short period of time. We want to find the movements that help to centralize your symptoms. What that means is I have this numbness and tingling going down my leg. I start doing this particular directional preference. And now instead of the pain or the symptoms, I should say symptoms, the numbness and tingling being in the back of my thigh, now I only feel them near my buttocks. Now I only feel it in my low back. That is good. That is centralization of those symptoms. That is key to helping treat a herniated disc. Now, where it gets confusing is a lot of people would say, herniated disc, classical presentation, you use extension-based exercises. We live in Syracuse. We have the McKenzie headquarters in Syracuse.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right? Pretty cool. So there's a lot of McKenzie-based therapists in our area or in our region. For reference, Robin McKenzie, older physio, that basically found this idea of directional preference. And it's really cool how he found it. He was working with a client and he walked out of the room and he said, get comfortable. I'll be back in a few minutes so we can start treatment. So he walked out of the room, the patient came back in and the patient was in this extended position on a table. And the patient was like, this alleviates my symptoms. And from observation, Robin McKenzie said, that's interesting. We should probably look into this more. And then started doing directional preference testing. What is directional preference testing? Do flexion cycles for me, like reach down towards your toes. How'd that change your symptoms? Now let's lean back or do some press-ups more in an extension based movement. How did that change your symptoms? Now let's move into a lateral glide or just lateral bend going down to the side. If you imagine like your hand on the side of your pants and you're reaching down towards the outer part of your knee, let's do that to a side and then to the other side and see how your symptoms interact with that type of movement. Then let's do rotations and see how you interact with that. Robin McKenzie never was saying, if someone has a herniated disc, you always do extension. What Robin McKenzie was saying is, do a directional preference exam, see which movements decrease symptoms, and do those movements until symptoms are mitigated. And then let's get back to doing all of the movements. Because eventually we have to move in all these different directions again. We can't just live our life in flexion or just live our life in extension. You have to be able to move. The body's meant to be able to move in these different positions. So kind of the last segue of my long-winded answer here is the common thought was, so person has a herniated disc, we do extension. Person has spinal stenosis, we do flexion. Where this idea of extension for a herniated disc comes is from research on cadaver spines. which we've talked about before on this podcast. But what happens in a cadaver spine is a good baseline for us to start with. But what we're finding is that in the living human spine, the mechanics are different. It's not what's going to happen in the living spine. Example here, a cadaver spine, you go into flexion over a cycle or a series, and eventually the disc herniates posteriorly, meaning backwards. So the thought was when we move into a lot of flexion, then we get a posterior disc herniation. Again, this is in a spine that doesn't have fluid dynamics. It doesn't have healing potentials. It doesn't have the ability to become more adaptable. It doesn't have the potential to become resilient. When we look at flexion in a living human spine with a dynamic MRI, they've actually shown that at some of the low back levels, going into flexion actually push the disc anteriorly, which is the opposite of the findings of the cadaver studies. So what do we do with that?
Yeah.
We cannot assume that if someone has a disc herniation from imaging or from saying that I have a disc herniation, that extension is going to be the answer. If you're seeing stuff that says that, they're not diving into the nuances that you need to dive into to have a true framework that is hope. We would consider the other one being false hope. So we cannot answer the question of what should I do for a herniated disc by saying, do these 3 simple exercises.
Yeah.
We have to dive in and get the story to provide the appropriate framework based off of the evidence, the modern evidence, to give these types of suggestions.
But we can start with I'm safe and I will be okay.
You can start with that and give yourself some certainty that you will be okay. And you may not feel okay in the moment because a herniated disc, like a true herniated disc with symptoms going down the leg, it is uncomfortable. It is painful. I experienced that once, and I remember I was living in an apartment that was on the 2nd floor, crawling up the stairs, sleeping on the kitchen floor because that's where I could make it to, and in the morning biting down on a sock just to be able to put my socks on to get back into the clinic and work with people. And I didn't tell anybody what was going on, but my colleagues were like, what's going on? You haven't moved your back the entire day. You're doing these weird lunges to bring weights to people. You're like biting your lip awkwardly through the day. Like, what is happening? And I'm like, yeah, well, I had a mechanism injury. I had high internal load at the time. I think I am presenting with a herniated disc, but I know what to do. And I know that I'm going to be okay. Right now, I don't feel okay.
Yeah.
Right now, I feel lousy. I feel terrible. But I have peace in knowing that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because I know what's bringing this on. And I know that I don't have anything incredibly medically serious because I don't have incontinence. I don't have reflex changes. And I don't have unusual discharges. Like, those are all signs that say, hey, you need to go get medical attention, like, right away. Like, do not mess around with this. Did not have those. So having that knowledge immediately, I'm like, okay, this is not a emergency. It feels terrible. It's very painful, but it's not a medical emergency. And that gave me peace to now move on to, like, okay, what way can I move in? Well, into flexion, oh gosh, no. Into extension, yeah, that feels okay. But when I'm also starting to wonder, this is just more opinion based, but what I'm starting to wonder is it really the exercises that bring down the symptoms? And I think when there is a directional preference, the answer is yes. But aside from that directional preference, when people see these things of 3 simple exercises to decrease disc herniations, 1, there's confirmation bias because they've heard it all over the place. 2, is it the idea of having control in a situation that seemed like there wasn't control? So then the movement doesn't actually matter. What matters is that you have some certainty and you have a plan. And by you having a plan and feeling like you're back in control, is that what decreases the symptoms that you're experiencing?
Yeah, I'm not a medical professional, we know this, but for whatever reason, I have a group of people who reach out to me if any sort of injury happens because they know that I prioritize my health and fitness and that I have some base knowledge. this was even prior to us meeting, like people would do this, but even more so now because of your experience, they reach out to me. And what I find is that they're reaching out because, like you said, there's uncertainty, there's fear, they don't know what this is. And in that bubble of people, I know a lot of them, including myself at a time, if an injury happened, it was like, I'm going to be stuck with this the rest of my life. Like, that was the first thought. Like, I remember I shut my finger in my car door a couple years ago, and it was so painful. And then, like, I ended up going and getting imaging done because of how, like, whatever, I got imaging done. And the person told me, oh, you'll probably have, like, nerve pain there the rest of your life. I don't anymore. I'm fine. But, like, whoever, the PA at the urgent care said that. And so I was, like, scared. And I don't know. Anyways, all that to say, a lot of the people that I talk to, just on a personal, like, friendly level, those are the things that, like, those are the first things that go through their mind. Yeah. And so having, like, a quick fix gives them that, like, certainty or gives them confidence or whatever. But if we can just get people to, like, not have that as their first thought and have this as what you were saying of, I don't have all these, like, I don't have incontinence, I don't have all these things, so I know I will be okay. If people can have an injury and then say, I know I will be okay, I don't need to attach to, like, all of that fear, I think that is a huge win.
Yeah, it reminded me of the story, well, two that I'll share quick. Working with performing artists that are touring through the nation, I was working with one, and basically she came in because she was feeling something, didn't know what it was, and just wanted to know that she would be okay. Mm-hmm. That I don't need to go see an orthopedic, I don't need to get this further checked out. I just need to know, is what I'm feeling accurate, into the sense that this is just a muscle spasm? Mm. Yeah, this lines up exactly what that is. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, we just want some certainty when there's uncertainty. Why? Because the brain works by prediction. We'll keep coming back to that, the brain works by prediction. But the other thing I want to share is, back a while ago, working with a client that had a disc herniation and went through conservative treatment, meaning physical therapy, massage therapy, chiropractic, the alternative, not natural healing, alternative. And it didn't, still had symptoms, still had the numbness and tingling down the leg. So he then became a candidate for surgery. One had surgery on his lower back for the disc herniation, and working with him after the surgery, going through the protocol, he's doing really well, but he's still getting these zingers down his leg. So the first thought is the surgery not successful? Do I still have a disc herniation? Did I herniate another disc because I'm feeling the same symptoms? What is it that's bringing this on? And it was still too soon to tell, but later on in working together, brought up the conversation, well, what are your thoughts about the area that you had surgery on? And he's like, I don't know. I've never really took the time to think about that. I said, well, why don't we do that now? Because it wasn't matching up. There was no movement preference, different things we were doing. It's just, there was no pattern to the symptoms. There's no pattern to the symptoms. Then we start to look and go, okay, there's something that the brain is remembering that's making the prediction to create these symptoms versus mechanically creating this type of experience that the person's having. So I just asked them, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to envision the disc, and I want you to envision your spinal cord, and I want you to envision the nerves coming out to the side of that. And I want you to tell me, when you envision that, what do you see? And when people do this, it gets all different types of imagery comes up. For him, what came up was a truck that had a rope attached to something that it was pulling. Mm-hmm. And he envisioned that the rope was fraying away and that there was one thread left holding this rope together as two different things are pulling it. Mm-hmm. And he said, when I envisioned my spinal cord, that's what I envisioned. Is this one thread of a frayed rope holding on to it. Mm-hmm. The question you might be asking, well, is that enough to create numbness and tingling symptoms down your leg? Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so, because it's a request for change. And the change that his nervous system was asking for was changing his thoughts to what he believed this very important thing of his body to be. So I asked him is, well, what do you envision that is like robust and strong and gets the job done and doesn't just tear away? And he's like, oh, for a towing job, a big metal chain. Like, okay, great. Can we envision that rope being replaced with this big metal chain, with these strong links that you can pull anything with? And he's like, yeah, I could do that. So he did. And within 2 to 3 weeks, the symptoms were starting to be less. They're starting to be less often. Movement was starting to open up. And I think it was 4 or 6 weeks after that, continuing with the practice, the symptoms were gone.
Wow.
And it was that fear and that, I don't want to say unconscious thought, but it was a thought that had to be brought to conscious awareness, that he thought the structure that is incredibly important in my body is a frayed rope hanging on by one thread getting ready to just separate. And that your brain is working by prediction and it wants to protect. If that's the thought that's going to happen, it's going to be clamping down on telling these muscles, clamp down and protect that area. And by the way, what do nerves need to feel good? Movement, blood supply, and space. And if you have muscles contracting and protecting around it, what is that taking away from a nerve? Movement, blood supply, and space. So there's multiple ways that we can address the symptoms that may be experienced from a herniated disc. There's multiple ways to address the radiating pain that people feel down their legs that oftentimes can also be a result of too high of an internal load. So yeah, when we get these questions, what do I do for a herniated disc? It's like, I wish we could just, go do some prone press-ups and then stand up and do some back bends and just keep doing extension and you'll be good from there. Like, no, there's much more to it. And the way that we get to the simple, not easy solutions is by having these conversations.
Well, I feel like that was a hope story in and of itself. Like that was awesome. I appreciate you sharing about that and the importance of conversations, because that kind of ties into my hope story. Do you mind if I go first?
Go for it.
So I was texting with my childhood best friend to set up a time to chat on the phone. And we set up a time and then she just goes, by the way, I might be running while we're on the phone because I'm training like for a 5K.
Oh, let's go.
And I was like, okay, like that's fine with me, like whatever. And I said something along the lines of like, do you ever push your 2 kids in the stroller when you're running? And like, she just kind of laughed about it or whatever. We get on the phone call and she goes, today I actually ran and I pushed the kids in the stroller. And I was like, what do you mean? I just, my best friend, she's been running her whole life. She played basketball, cross country, she ran track. Like, she is a runner. And she hasn't been running since having the kids because like she personally just didn't feel comfortable running while pregnant. And she has 2 kids under the ages of like 3 or 2.5. Like, so she's like gone back to back with that. And then also postpartum, like she couldn't run. So there were certain things there. But anyways, I'm telling you this story because all I did was have the conversation and just casually be like, oh, do you push your kids while running? And it was the first time she ever thought, oh, I could push my kids while running. Like, she had never even thought about doing that or trying that. And typically, like, she only gets to work out either when they're napping during the day or like after they go to bed. And if they're not on the same sleep schedule, then like it's hard for her to work out. And so that day that we talked on the phone was the first time that she ever put them in the stroller and ran. And she said it was a great time and she did really well. It's very different because it's heavy and it's a different type of running. But it made me so excited because I think it gave her the creative ability of like, yes, I can go on walks with my kids, but I can also like push them in a stroller too, like while running. So I love my best friend. I'll talk about her all the time, but I was really proud of her for taking that and for doing a 5K. I mean, training for a 5K is hard when you've had 2 kids and haven't, like, she's been active, but she hasn't been running in the way that she used to run. So
Right.
yeah, I'm really proud of her.
Oh, that's awesome. And she's a go-getter.
Mhm.
I can imagine her putting like extra weights in the stroller
Yeah.
and like making like a heavy sled and like the baby's cheering. I know, mom, mom.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. So my hope story and tying in with this episode is that when we face these discomforts in life, it's surrounded by uncertainty. And one of our clients is facing a neurodegenerative condition that has a lot of uncertainty around it. It's a condition that's very hard to keep perspective and like daily, to stay disciplined in your thoughts. And the other day he shared with me, instead of thinking of what if, I started thinking of what is. And the what is that I have this condition. The what is that this condition has taught me so many things in life that I would not have learned if I did not have this condition. Having this condition has allowed me to meet you, some of the nursing staff, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. This condition has allowed me to become a better husband, a better father, a better business owner, a better friend, a better brother. And instead of thinking of the what if I get out of this, I'm thinking of the what is. What if this is the will that I have for my life? I wish it was different, but it's not. And the certainty that I'm going to find in it is that I've learned a lot from this. And so no matter the barrier, no matter the obstacle, no matter the discomfort that you face, helping yourself find the certainty by finding perspective in what it is that you're meant to learn. I mentioned earlier that I had the experience of what I think would hypothesize as a herniated disc. I later learned because I blamed it on toes to bar and deadlifts. And in my brain at the time, I was like, well, that makes sense. Like these movements. And I look at it, I'm like, well, actually a deadlift, like you might get a little bit of flexion, but toes to bar, you're getting a lot of extension. So when they offset each other from a mechanical perspective, if this whole disc herniation posteriorly, older theory that's been debunked is true. But what I learned in that injury is that, wow, I've done those movements 1,000 times. Why was this the time that I had it? Sorry to keep going back to this, but the older thought would be, well, because you reached the end of your flexion cycles that your spine could hold, so then you had the herniation from the cadaver spine studies. No, your spine has become more adaptable. Your disc has become stronger because of the flexion cycles that you have done. So guess what? Xing that out, that's not the reason. So why did I have those symptoms? What was I supposed to learn in that? I was supposed to learn about internal load. I didn't realize how much internal load I had on me at the time.
Yeah.
In that experience, it took me a while to learn that, but brought me to the research that we do now, the topics that we deliver now, writing the book, and that like, wow, there's more to this than just that one event hurt me. Like, no, you had too much going on. You had too much on your shoulders that you were not coping with. Your body wanted protection. You kept trying to push. You kept going to bed and saying like, nah, you'll be better tomorrow.
90 hours a week.
You kept sleeping it off. You'll be good. And then eventually it was like, yeah, you're good until you're not.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different things along the path that told you to slow down that you did not honor and you did not listen to. So every experience of discomfort can teach you something if you're able to keep the perspective of that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening. We hope that this episode helped you. If you know anybody that is going through a herniated disc or anything like that, please share this with them, and hopefully it can be a source of encouragement, a source of peace, and really a source of certainty. That really is the goal.
Yeah, very much so. Have a great week, and remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, it's an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.